Welcome, everybody, to Neutrality Studies. My name is Pascal Lotin. I'm an associate professor at Kyoto University, and today I have a very special guest. For the first time, I am pleased to be joined by Nima Alkhorshid, a assistant professor in soil mechanics, a civil engineer, and of course, as all of you will know, the host of the wonderful podcast Dialogue Works, on which Nima has been for the last 4 years, I believe, exploring international relations, and he's been talking with many people. He's been doing like wonderful work that personally inspired me as well, and he has been especially vocal also about the horrible case that's going on with my countryman Jacques Beau, something that I'm very grateful for. So it's a great pleasure having you, Nima. Welcome to the channel.
My pleasure, Pascal. It's so great to be on with you. Finally, we get together, and thank you so much for your kind introduction.
I'm very glad that we get to talk. We want to discuss mainly Iran in the latter part, but we have to start a little bit. I think just with your channel, because I mean, on your channel you're exploring so many topics. You have got so many wonderful guests. But I'm actually, we just chatted a tiny little bit before we started here, and I was never aware of like why you started this. And as a civil engineer, how did it come that you ended up in geopolitics on YouTube?
Oh, when I decided to start this podcast and this channel, was the main goal was what is going on in Ukraine, because during those days I knew little about Russia. I didn't know who's Vladimir Putin, who's Russia, and what are the motives in Ukraine. Why is Russia invading Ukraine? These were main questions in my mind. And one of the other reasons that all of a sudden I heard the president of Russia saying that we want to denazify Ukraine. I said, what is that? Denazifying Ukraine? Is Nazism still alive in Ukraine? Who are these people? I was thinking that the Nazis are from mostly from Germany, were from Germany, Poland, the most, and how they can get to Ukraine. I was totally ignorant in that, so I had no idea what's going on in Ukraine. That was my main motive to start with the podcast. I wanted to talk with the people who know what's going on in that region, militarily, economically, politically, to understand the whole case of Ukraine. Then little by little I got familiar with the foreign policies, with what's going on with the foreign policy of Europe, Russia, the United States. What is the main objective of the United States in Ukraine? And then everything started little by little. I didn't want it to go that far, but it happened all of a sudden. It wasn't nothing planned on my side. It all happened all of a sudden, and just happening, understanding, learning. It was a huge learning process for me, because I had no idea how the foreign policy of a country is defined and is implemented.
So you basically fell down the rabbit hole and you dug ever deeper. By now, uh, what do you believe you have understood after basically 4 years of this? And it's quite a coincidence, because I know your channel from a very early point on, because I actually also started just in around February 2022 doing my channel seriously, and I've seen what you've been doing and how you've been approaching it. And I always admired that you had so many just questions to your people. Now it makes total sense. Like, those were always very honest questions. And where are you now with your own insights after 4 years? How world politics works?
I am somewhere that John Mearsheimer describes as might makes right.
Mm.
I think he's totally right when it comes to the foreign policy of the United States. And the foreign policy of the United States was the main driver of the policies all around the world, because they were the sole superpower. and they, all of the countries, it doesn't matter, it comes from the West Asia, go to Russia as a superpower, they were all influenced by the foreign policy of the United States. And the foreign policy of the United States is based on might makes right. And whatever, it doesn't matter how powerful other countries are, you have to keep them regional, even they don't seek. I think one of the main concept of the foreign policy of the United States is what was documented in Wolfowitz doctrine. And I got familiar with this doctrine first talking with Paul Kirk Roberts. And he mentioned what is happening with the foreign policy of the United States and why they're doing this to the West Asia. What is happening in Ukraine, what is happening in Taiwan. These are all pieces coming together in my mind by understanding what is going on, a combination of what John Mearsheimer tries to, to explain for the whole world. How does it work? It doesn't mean that he agrees on whatever the United States is thinking of. He's just picturing the mindset of those people, neocons. You call it neocons, neoliberals, the blob, the deep state, whatever you can call them. But the mindset, it's a simple calculation. Might makes right. I think that's still at this particular moment in 2026, with the war in Ukraine after 4 years, with the war between the United States and Iran is about to happen. And we can argue that's still the case with the, you know.
It's depressing, isn't it? Like, because we would love the world to be a better place, and we would love to believe that international law matters and that norms matter, and that individual countries matter. And the United Nations General Assembly, one country, one vote. Okay, we're all aware that the Security Council has kind of different rules, but in principle we would like it to be like this, but the world isn't. And how does it look like from Brazil now, where you are? I mean, how are people there perceiving this spiral of doom that it seems to me that the US and Europe are in right now, because they are just getting more and more violent?
It's so amazing that you've mentioned the UN, United Nations. And there were times, I would say, the golden times of United Nations. They were capable of doing something and avoiding something. That has somehow disappeared from the scene. It's not because of the UN as a organization, it's because of the United States. Because the United States, in the aftermath of the World War II, it was a sole superpower. And each and every country, before voting in the, call it in the assembly, even those in the UN Security Council, they were somehow seen looking at the United States. What is the decision on the part of the United States? Then they decided about their sort of view to go in. But as the United States somehow is the influence of the United States has been diminished during the years because of the rise of BRICS, rise of China. Russia is not in the same place. You remember in 2010 in Russia when Putin came to power, Russia was a total mess. And it took Russia 10 years from 2000 to 2010 to put an end to the conflict, internal conflict in Russia. With Chechnya, with Dagestan, these people who were somehow, working together with CIA to destabilize Russia. But all those destabilization have disappeared from the scene. And you see China is growing, BRICS is growing as a powerful alternative to what the United States has to offer. That that has changed the reality of the UN. UN today is not influenced by the United States, is influenced by all these powers. That's why you see when it comes to Palestine, to Israel, you see the United States is simply alone. Nobody's voting the way that the United States is supporting Israel. Nobody agrees. Most of the countries it doesn't agree with the United States and their policies in the West Asia. That I said that to come to Brazil. Brazil is a huge country. Look at the map, you see how huge is Brazil. Brazil is the most important country in the Latin America considering the economy. But Brazil didn't have that much of leverage when it comes to the foreign policy. They were not that much focused on the foreign policy. But Brazil is in the process of changing, and the change is happening drastically because of the connection with China, the connection with Russia, the connection with BRICS. They see that the United States is not, I don't know, you may remember when Donald Trump came to power, he simply went against the current president of Brazil,
Yeah.
supporting Bolsonaro, the previous president, and saying that you have to do this and that, whatever I'm. He was trying to force the policies of the United States on Brazil, or you do it, or you get 50% tariffs on Brazil. The Brazilians said, "Go with the 50% tariff."
Yeah, and by now we know that Brazil overall had it easy. I mean, Venezuela got just regime changed, 100 people dead, president kidnapped. I mean, it's kind of stunning, isn't it? Like the kind of things that the United States can get away with these days, and even receive applause from Europe, which for me as a European is is even more. I don't know how to call it. It's not so much surprising, but just it makes my stomach turn. It's like all the things, all of the speech acts of these people, all of the um calling out for a rules-based order and calling themselves like moral superpowers. And then they just go along with the most horrible kind of infringements of all the international laws, and they still pretend that everything's all right. Um, is Latin America, South America, is Brazil like perceiving that, or is everything kind of it has always been like this?
You know what has happened in Venezuela, and I think the whole Latin America is under such a pressure from the United States. It's not Venezuela. You see with Cuba, something may
Mm,
happen in Cuba. It may go to Venezuela, to Colombia, and it's you know whatever you mentioned about Europe. What has happened in Europe? What has happened in Ukraine? Who's going to take the pieces of Ukraine? It's going to be Europeans.
of
Who's going to
course.
take the pieces of Venezuela and Cuba if something happens in Cuba as well? You see all these people coming to Brazil. The United States, the foreign policy of the United States, has put tremendous pressure on Europe for such a long time. It's not just about Ukraine. You go to Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and Ukraine, they devastated. One of the main problems that Europe is facing today is because of this sort of, you know, uncontrolled, you know, borders, we can say, because these coming, undocumented people, when they come to a country, they may bring such a huge challenge for the country, because Iran has the same thing with the case of Afghanistan. It wasn't just Europe being influenced you know by immigrants. Iran, you remember, I would say, when I went to Iran, 40, it was in for 40 days I was in Iran. I went there in December 2025. And I learned that Iran, more than 12 million Afghans are in Iran, mostly undocumented. A country like 91 million, accepting 12 million of immigrants in such a short period of time. It was after the United States leaving Afghanistan. It's not just during, you know, it was huge. And these are, the consequences, the outcomes of the foreign policy of the United States, as nobody is taking responsibility for that. And, and nobody is willing to push hard against the United States that these policies are influencing us. Here in Brazil, we had the same. There is no such a, honest, a how to say, a working relationship between Brazil and the United States, because The United States under the Trump administration is not capable of communicating with Brazilian president,
Mm.
and they see no outcome, no viable outcome if they go and talk with the United States under the Trump administration. This is the problem.
So, like the heavy hand of the U.S. and accompanied by that, the com- the complice the complacent like European states that go along with it, cheer it on, that participate in coalitions of the willing. Now they try to do this again with Ukraine and keep pushing Ukrainians into the bayonets of the Russians, and make this bloodletting all but inevitable, and then blame it on Russia and call people like us Russian propagandists for like simply calling out the fact that their actions have consequences too. Um, how is it? How your channel is called Dialogue Works, and I love that title because that's how I want the world to be. I want dialogue to work things out, but we see that the warmongers, they refuse to talk. They refuse to actually have dialogue. Did you ever try to invite some of them? Because I did, and they always say no.
Yeah, I tried to talk with them and they said no, they're not going to be, and because Pascal, they have everything. They have the mainstream media. They have everything. They don't need to come to the alternative media, the channels like you, whatever. You're doing an amazing job inviting people who are mostly unknown in the mainstream media, the people who know what they're talking about, but the mainstream media doesn't want to know these people, doesn't talk with these people. This is the main problem.
But it's kind of surprising, isn't it? And then we find people like, and I know you had him on your channel several times, like Ted Postel, right? And Jacques Beau and Jeffrey Sachs and Mearsheimer and so on. Like, highly competent people in their fields, highly accomplished, and nobody wants to listen to them. It's like, I mean, in the mainstream, it's kind of it makes your head explode. When I tell my parents about who I got to talk to, they're like, "Oh, these are really important people, aren't they?" It's like, yes, they are. And for some reason, mainstream discourse just expels them. So, what do you think we have to do in order to make dialogue not only work again but happen again?
I think the only way that it could work, it could be, breaking down this mindset of soul being the United States being the sole superpower. The way that many people may understand, because our audience on Dialogue Works, I think they mostly are informed about what's going on with the big picture of the world, of our planet. We are living, I would say, Pascal, I really believe that the war in Ukraine has totally changed everything, each and every calculation. And maybe later, in 20 years, in 100 years, some people would describe it as a watershed moment in which the whole world has changed. And it's so important, Pascal, because it's not just about Russia and Ukraine. It's about how the United States even can push that far against a superpower, a nuclear superpower, going right at the doorstep of Russia. When they can do it to Russia, how do you feel about a country like Venezuela or Brazil or Iran?
I mean, by now they've shown what they will do, right? They will come in with Apache helicopters, kill people, and take whatever they want, and because they can, because it works. And then to add insult to injury, the kidnapped abductees are then put on a show trial in New York, among other things, for the illegal possession of firearms under U.S. domestic law. Just like the height of ridiculousness, but it just drives home the point. We do whatever we want, and U.S. law applies to everyone if we say so. Period. So you don't want to comply? Well, Apache coming. It's a scary moment. It's a very scary moment because we always thought that in the Cold War, the image of the Cold War, the bad guys are always in the East, right? you always go,
Exactly.
James Bond always fights Russia, and then you figure out, oh, James Bond itself is part of the entire brainwashing propaganda game. Okay, fine. the what do you think? Is it in my view, though, the reputation of the US and Europe are irreparably damaged in the global South. Do you think they will ever manage to gain back, the hearts and minds of the people?
I don't believe. I don't believe that the United States, with this sort of behavior, that they have been, trying to push everything, trying to force countries into some sort of arrangement that they have in their mind. That's not going to work. This is not the way that the world is working today. The shift, Pascal, I cannot emphasize enough how important BRICS is.
Mm,
I think BRICS is the future. BRICS is the next UN. BRICS can bring all these institutions. The United States has a choice. Do they really want to make UN working? They can see what is happening in BRICS.
mm,
What is happening in BRICS? You see all these countries with their differences, but when they try to decide about something, they put all differences aside and decide what is the common ground to work with. This is not going to work with the United States in this current shape and form, because this shape is the mindset of those people who are belong to the Cold War. They don't understand the new reality of the world. They don't understand that when Donald Trump has started, it's not that far away. It was in January 2026, in 2025, Donald Trump coming to power and forcing China, trying to put tariffs on China. And just look at the outcome. He simply started the conflict. It started this economic war, and he capitulated. Did you saw that? Did you see that in the mainstream media happening? Did
no,
they
it is
picture that correctly for the world to see what really happened?
no, these moments then just are conveniently forgotten. Just like the Ukraine war will be conveniently forgotten once Russia is in Odessa, or maybe even Kiev, although I kind of don't think so. But once they stop, and then there's this demilitarized zone, and Ukraine will be unable to continue the fight, then they just gonna forget about it. It's like, oh, really? Was there something? Just like, oh, tariffs on China. Was there something? I mean, it's this selective memory holding that then goes on, and that then forms and shapes the perception of the masses in Europe and North America. But I have this feeling that it won't work much longer, because the next thing, and what the United States seems to be preparing right now, and who knows? I mean, it's Friday evening here in Japan. It's it's possible that the attack on Iran will come tonight. Especially my friends in the finance world keep saying that the optimal time for something like this would be on a Friday evening after markets close in New York, in order to have 2 days time before the oil markets go completely berserk. So they kind of the bets are on a Friday night. Sneak attack, probably like something like 3 or 4 a.m. in Iran. If they do that, if that actually happens, and this time Iran made it crystal clear, it's not going to be a 12-day war. It's going to be a long war, because this time we're gonna really fire back, not just do things for show and for communication. If that happens, it might, unless the United States can end it and win within 6 days, 7 days, a week, whatever winning means. It's gonna drive another nail into the coffin of this superpower, but it might at the same time kill many, many, many innocent people in Iran, of course. How are you assessing that situation? And I mean, you have personal ties to Iran as well. How do you perceive this entire horror show at the moment?
I would say what's going on between Iran and the United States at this particular time, at this particular moment, is the way that it was on December 21st between Russia and the whole West,
Mm,
NATO, and the United States. The Russian president sent two letters to the United States and to the NATO headquarters, informing that this is going to be the outcome. You're going to fight. We're ready to fight. You're going to come to some sort of agreement, some sort of, you know, geopolitical or political architecture, security architecture for Europe. We are ready for that. Iran is in that moment. Iran is in that moment. They're trying, the policymakers in Iran, the foreign policy of Iran believes that they can negotiate. It doesn't matter if the United States is trying to attack Iran. Their duty is to talk, is to negotiate, and they're doing their best. On the other hand, you see the military intelligence, all of them are so much prepared to go in this fight. For many people who don't understand what Iran is today, I would say you need to understand, the war that Russia is fighting in Ukraine, Iran has fought it in 1980. The United States has started a proxy war against Iran using the Iraqi government, Iraqi military. It wasn't just the United States. Iran is, in those days was, it was right after the revolution happening in Iran. And everything was so fragile. And there was no such a government as we know today. There was no system, and everything was somehow shaping in Iran. Then Iran was attacked by Iraq. Who was supporting the war on Iran? Europeans, mostly. I'm talking about Germany, United Kingdom, all these Arab states except Syria and Libya, and even Soviet Union was helping Iraq in that war against Iran. Iran has survived that war. Iran was alone in those days. The situation today is not that. It's not the same way it was before. The United States is not the same superpower it was before. It doesn't matter how big the United States is trying to build up these military arms in the Middle East. When I was in Iran, I told you that for 40 days I was in Iran, tried to talk with the people on the streets. I talked with officials, many officials. And what is happening, it's somehow there is a connection between the public opinion and the leadership when it comes to the foreign, an attack on Iran. They say the only solution would be to go and fight them. And we did it before. We know those people who were fighting in their 20s, in their 18s, they were fighting in Iraq, where these people are the commanders right now in Iran. These are not people that they have no experience in war. They know what war is and how ugly that can get. What Iran is fighting, if the war happens, Pascal, it's going to be an existential war for Iran. Iran has no choice. Iran cannot afford losing a war against the United States and Israel. And that's why I think Iran would do everything. Many people are saying that more than 50% of the military power of the United States is in the Middle East, and 50% is huge. Believe me, that's a huge buildup in the Middle East. But when you talk with the people, with the officials, they're not afraid of that. This was hugely amazing for me because they see this. They can survive. They can fight back. And this is a war of choice for the United States. It's not an existential war. And they're gonna, and I have no doubt that the United States, believe me, I have no doubt that the United States will lose. They're not going to be able to win. When I'm talking about losing, I'm not talking about, because when it comes to the sustainability of the war, it's not going to be a quick war, a war that they can just hit Iran in 1 week or 10 days and then get away with the whole concept of attack. Iran going to hit back, and they're going to hit back hard. And if their whole concept of war is based on what Israel is asking for, Israel is going to be devastated. Many people don't understand that. I am not happy with any sort of war. I don't want to see any country being devastated by war, because we saw what has happened in Gaza. Look at what has happened in Gaza before and after October, before October the 7th. Look at what was Gaza before and look at what Gaza is today. The war is not bringing any sort of peace.
No, it's making of course everything worse. But the thing is, some people believe it's a solution, right? You can use the big hammer. I mean, they literally the in the 12th Day War, the attack at the nuclear facility, they called it Midnight Hammer, right? It's like, even, I mean, even these kind of naming conventions of their operations makes me wonder if these are not like 12-year-olds thinking that they're playing a stupid video game. But some people believe they can take a hammer and thereby then just make the problem go away. But this one won't. I mean, you put it very well when you pointed out how many things the Islamic Republic of Iran already survived, and you know how the only time that a genuinely indigenous revolution swept away a regime, that was the regime of the Shah. That was the installed fake, artificial regime that was put in place in place of the democratically elected Mr. Mossadegh, right? Who until this day, if I understand it correctly, still enjoys like very, very high regard in large parts of the Iranian population. I've never been in Iran, but that's what I hear from my friends and colleagues. And the Islamic Revolution then kind of brought to power people with whom, I mean, also the left and the progressive part of Iran doesn't agree with. But trying to attack a country and thereby then believing that you can just get rid of that government seems, especially in a country as big as Iran with 90 million people and the landmass it has, seems just incredibly foolish. The 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 main argument, though, is that yes, regime change will come because the local population is like 70-80% are under the thumb of the 10-15% of the mullahs, as they call them. And I think there couldn't be bigger of a misunderstanding. Can you maybe tell us a little bit from your analysis and from your personal knowledge how Iran works and how Iran also deals with its own internal disagreements on politics?
It's not just unique about Iran. It happened in Russia as well. They say all it's Putin and Russian, Russia, they were, you remember, they were demonizing Putin and Putinizing Russia in order to bring everything down in Russia. Let's focus on Iran. Your main question is Iran. Iran today is nothing of what the West is trying to picture for us. They oversimplify everything in order to cover their ignorance of what is happening today in Iran. They call it mullahs, the mullahs regime. It's not anything about mullahs. It's a system powered by the people, by many people. You have to see the whole system. The system is in, it's not even related to the mullahs. They don't have any sort. This is a country that has defined for more than, when in the aftermath of the revolution, we had these religious institutions being somehow trying to manage everything because the revolution was so young. But as time went by, you see the system capturing the power in Iran. The system is running the country. It's not anything of that rhetoric that they to oversimplify everything. Iran is a huge, I would say. Look at the government, the way that the government works. Look at the parliament in Iran. Look at the various, tools in the country to be used. They say that the supreme leader of Iran is not elected by the people. But those people who are choosing the supreme leader of Iran and they can bring him down, they were, voted to be in their position. These are, this is so ridiculous for me, for someone who understands Iran. Iran is nothing of this sort of the way that the mainstream media tries to draw for us. And today, when they're talking about bringing down the government, killing the supreme leader, because you understand, you see every day, we're going to assassinate the supreme leader of Iran and his son. That's going to be a huge change. That's going to bring a lot of change. No, it's simple. That's simply not true. That's
Yeah,
not
because
going to bring any sort of change in you in the favor of your argument.
they always think that the leader or the most memorable head of a country is the country, as if though the United States would collapse tomorrow if somebody shot Donald Trump. I mean, Trump would be dead, the United States would live, and the United States would live to be furious and outraged. But for some reason, they believe that if you do that to another country, then it's going to be all gone. I of course, some people understand this, and we know in the United States, especially the military understands that that's not the case, and they're actually currently warning the White House from doing something as foolish as that, because once the bombs start dropping, it's going to be very difficult to make them stop again. I mean, the making them stop after the 12th Day War, that was already an achievement, mainly on the side of Iran, which decided not to retaliate anymore in a drastic way after Midnight Hammer, right? But it takes a lot of courage then to end fighting. If you had to describe Iran to Westerners, what would you say is the most important thing to get about how the system works?
I would say that the system in Iran is not. Let's put it this way. Do you think that the system in Switzerland is similar to what is happening in France?
No.
They have nothing to do with each other. Iran is a unique system, Pascal. Is a unique system. When you have the supreme leader of Iran, you have various points. You have the government in Iran, and the people saying that the supreme leader of Iran is running to show that the governments have no authority, they have no power to implement their own policies. That's false, hugely false. To some extent, you can say that the supreme leader of Iran controlling everything. You know, he is some sort of balance between the left and right in Iran. We have two kind of forces, two political parties. Well, we cannot call them parties, in the way that the United States is working, because it's somehow different. To understand that, you have to see the you see the same people coming out of a revolution, the main mindset, and they have different ideas on how they can bring their policies to the domestic audience, to the foreign audience, how they can connect with the people in Iran, and they can have a better relationship with other countries. But the supreme leader is some sort of balance between the left and right. We call them reformists and conservatives in Iran. And they always try to remain, to remain in the middle, at the center, not being tilted to the left or right, and helping the country. The main goal was that. But the most policies today, internally and externally, are, when it comes to the Iranian nuclear program, is a question of the national security of Iran. That's why you see the supreme leader is totally dominant. His view and his understanding is dominant in the whole calculation. But most of the policies, 99% of the policies, internally and externally, are decided by the governments in Iran. That means that the United States, the supreme leader, doesn't participate or doesn't influence that much those policies. And this is hugely misunderstood in the West.
The one of the things brought up is that, of course, inside Iran you have a good number of people who oppose the central government, who oppose the supreme leader, and they flee the country. They then live abroad. I know several of them, and they are unhappy with the theocratic rule. On the other hand, in the United States, you have at least 50% who are extremely unhappy with the current regime. So, like, finding opposition in a country is to finding opposition to the current position is really nothing extraordinary. It's just why do you think it is that in the West, in the West and in Europe too, there's so many people? We find a lot of people who agree that violence would be warranted in order to overthrow this government. What do you think is the prime motivation?
Pascal, the agenda for the Middle East is not having a big, important, powerful country in the Middle East.
Right.
When it comes to the war in Iraq, as I've mentioned, the whole concept, Iran was in the most fragile
Mm.
situation when when the war happened in 1980s. It took 8 years for Iran to get rid of the war against the war that the Iraqis started. And the concept, look at what is happening in the Middle East. Look at these Arab states in the Persian Gulf. Do you think that what has happened, the Israeli attack on Doha, you know, Qatar is one of the most important allies of the United States in the Middle East. And yet you see 15 Israeli fighter jets, flying over Saudi Arabia, going to Qatar and hitting the targets in the civilian parts of Qatar and getting back. And nobody's hitting back. Nobody's taking care of what has happened. Nobody's capable of defending Qatar or knowing that is happening. They want Iran to be like this. They want Iran to be divided. Look at what has happened. I think the most important instance right now is what has happened in Syria.
Right.
They all said that Assad is the most problematic government in the region. And they brought down Assad and overthrew the Assad, regime, so-called regime. Assad is gone. Is the problem solved in Syria? Syria is divided in 5 regions, if I'm not mistaken, today.
Now Syria is dead.
Syria was devastated. It's destroyed. Syria is not going to be unified again the way it was during the Assad regime, Assad government. And it's all gone. The main agenda goes to Iran, Pascal. The main agenda goes to Iran. They want to divide Iran in pieces. They said, let's break down Russia in federations. They want to break down Iran in provinces. The Kurdistan province, Arab province, Turk province, and these are Baluchi province. These are the agenda on the part of the United States in the region, because they don't want the only country, real country in the West Asia, influential, that is capable of fighting back is Iran today. Turkey is part of NATO. Iran is not part of NATO. Iran is not part of anything. One of the main things that I mentioned before, that the war in Ukraine has changed everything. Because Iran, if you remember JCPOA, the nuclear program, nuclear agreement with the United States and 5 European countries all together, they signed an agreement, JCPOA, and Donald Trump withdrew from that agreement. And the agreement, Pascal, was somehow during those days, Russia and China were trying to be in the middle, not being that much helping Iran, or the United States was trying to do something that worked best for them. Today, Russia and China are not in the same position. Europe is not in the same position. Europe has lost its importance when it comes to the foreign policy of Iran. The foreign minister of Iran said something amazing recently, that the trades between Iran and Afghanistan are more than what Iran has with the whole Europe. What is that?
I mean, it's not difficult if you are like sanctioned up to the neck, right? And Iran is not just under the sanctions that Russia is; it's under these UN sanctions, which were still taken at a time when China and Russia were largely going along. Even if they didn't vote for them, they okayed them by abstaining from voting in the Security Council against them. But those days are gone as well. I mean, the sanctions are still there because unfortunately, the UN resolution and the Security Council resolution on them is still there. But neither China nor Russia would ever do something like this again. On the contrary, they're now trying to somehow help Iran to withstand the coming onslaught. Um, but let me just ask you, because you're a civil engineer and you used a very good metaphor, a very good terminology earlier in the talk, which is that of a security architecture. For you as an engineer, how would you think that a useful architecture should look like on the Eurasian continent? And if you were the engineer tasked with building it, where would you start?
I think I would start with the South Caucasus. South Caucasus is the heart of the Eurasia. If you can secure the South Caucasus, you're going to secure the concept of Eurasia and the whole concept of the East. And what do we have in that region? We have Armenia, Azerbaijan, going up to Georgia. And look at what has happened recently. The British government trying to go there, trying to get closer to the governments in that region. Look at what has happened with the strategic, agreement between, the vice president of the United States went to Azerbaijan, signing a new strategic agreement. These are the future wars that Lindsey Graham is talking about, that
Yeah.
Israel is planning the future wars. The future war is going to be in not only against Iran, but the whole South Caucasus, because you have to destabilize the whole region in order to achieve something. They tried it with the case of Georgia,
Yeah.
then Ukraine. Right now, they're coming to the problem, by the way, with this concept of destabilizing the region is that these governments are not that much capable of destabilizing the region. It doesn't matter how much powerful, the United States is and how much support they can bring to these governments. You look at what has happened in Ukraine: 700,000 soldiers before February 22 were prepared to fight against Russia. All those soldiers are gone. Ukraine was devastated as an outcome. Ukraine cannot survive, in my opinion, as a viable country if they let Russia get Odessa and Nikolaev and goes up to the Kharkov. They will cease to exist as an independent country. It's going to be a little state somewhere. The same thing would happen to the Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan, you know that during the 12-day war between Iran and Israel, Azerbaijan was used to attack Iran.
Mm.
Recently, we had the head of the Security Council of Iran, Ali Larijani, going to the whole countries in the West Asia, in the Persian Gulf Arab states, and even talking with Azeris, with the government in Azerbaijan, that if you participate in a war against Iran, you're going to be devastated. It's not just in the interest of Iran alone. Russia understands how important is the situation in the South Caucasus. China knows how important, because these are huge economic projects, Pascal. The
Mm.
North-South corridor. You see the Belt
The
and Road
Silent Road.
Initiative. These are
Mhm.
huge economic, and the United States under the Trump administration try to manipulate as much as they can the South Caucasus. I think my opinion is that Russia today is not Russia it was before the war in Ukraine. China today is not China it was before the war in Ukraine and before the tariff war against China, because these countries are forced to understand their strength, their might, to experience their might that they had, and they never thought that they're going to use that might to go against the United States. This is what these countries are learning, from their own experiences. Russia has learned that from its own experience. A defensive Russian army in 2022 that many people in the West were arguing that going to be defeated, going to be trapped in Ukraine, is now getting, has got 22% of Ukraine, 85% of their GDP.
When we look at this, it's quite interesting that you are mentioning the South Caucasus as the main flashpoint. or the main point to actually change something. Because to me, this region, just like Ukraine, are standard examples, like textbook examples of having to use neutrality as a solution in order to create a buffers and no man's land for the interest of the entire architecture, and make sure that they remain like this in order to secure everybody on both sides and themselves as well. But that's why, the failure of neutrality to emerge as the solution to Ukraine, which it was, and then it was undermined and it was done away with, and it was prevented from coming back as a solution. That to me is like the main crime, and the biggest hope I have with the South Caucasus is that Georgia is showing that it is possible to kind of, even if not in words, then at least in deeds, to kind of take back such a position and de-escalate the situation. If Armenia and Azerbaijan went a similar route, and if then Iran had an equidistant relationship with both, that would win so much in terms of creating stability. But unfortunately, the powers that are interested in destabilization and in chaos, they are working overtime to prevent that. So the question to me really is how to strengthen those independent neutralist forces on the ground, because it would create stability. Is there anything in this regard that you would say, like, yes, or no, that we need to keep in mind when we think of building architectures?
In terms of building architectures, I think the architecture is in the process of being built by
Mm,
Russia, China, and Iran. It's not something, they have it in their mind. They know what is the reality of the region. And with the case of the war against Iran, Pascal, just look at the situation not as an isolated conflict in Ukraine or isolated conflict against Iran. Look at the big picture. Who's who's the most competitor? Who's the most important competitor of the United States today in the world? It's called a country called China.
mm,
So, what is China? China is a huge, gigantic engine that can
mm.
produce everything, everything from the single part of an equipment going to the big and huge, you know, military,
Aircraft
fighter
carriers.
jets, everything, everything.
Yeah.
They produce everything, Pascal,
Mm,
everything. So, how can you bring down a country like China? The only solution, in my opinion, that is a viable choice for those people, neocons and neoliberals in the United States, is that you have to bring down the supplies to China, the supply of energy. Who's supplying China with energy? Russia and Iran. What is happening in Ukraine was an agenda that they thought that together with European can trap Russia in Ukraine the way that Russia would not be able to stand up. Or somehow the worst scenario was the best scenario for them was that breaking down Russia in federations. The same is happening right now. They're trying to attack Iran. The same concept. Venezuela, what was happening in Venezuela? What was the importance of Venezuela? Maduro said, I'm ready for whatever deal you want to bring to the table. They said, no, no, you have to do whatever we want you to do. These are the strategy of the United States today is to control the energy market, is going to control, because this is the only way that they can hit China the way that the military they're talking about going to fight China in Taiwan. I think that's totally stupid. Nobody would do that. And you don't go that far to fight against China. And Taiwan is a little island. Just imagine, how can you fight China? And that's why I think the agenda on the part of the United States is just bring Russia and China, bring Iran and China in a situation. It's some sort of, after 1 year of the Trump administration, they did nothing to put an end to the conflict in Ukraine. And the war against Iran is happening as we talk. And it's all about China, Pascal. we can say that West Asia, it's a complex, sort of issue. China, Ukraine and Russia, Europe and Russia, they hate each other. Oh, I'm not ignoring that sort of facts. I understand the complexity of the issue in Ukraine and in the West Asia. But what I'm trying to say that the big picture says that the main target is China. And China today understands that totally.
Yeah. And the irony of the whole thing is that this entire last years on and more the last 5 6 years have really brought China and Russia together. Now they're including Iran into the mix. They include all of BRICS into the mix. The irony is that that's where basically the hope for a more balanced and a more multipolar world actually lies in this in what is being created right now out of a counter reaction which people like Mearsheimer predicted like ages ago, said like if you do this you will create the very thing that you're trying to avoid, a grand alliance between the others, and that alliance will look nothing like NATO. It's going to be, it already is, a completely different animal. But here we go. The way world politics seems to work, action and reaction of powers and forces, and apparently very very violent people in the West. I must emphasize that in the West, China, Iran. I mean, they haven't attacked a country for many years. The last war of China is in '79 with Vietnam, a short one. Iran, the last time was a war when it was attacked in the early '80s by Iraq, and before that, we often forget that Iran was invaded in 1942 by the Allies, by Britain and the Soviet Union. Those were the ones who invaded it in order to cut off the oil from Germany. But this takes us very far, and Nima, I would like to thank you for giving us your interpretation of where things are going, and also like letting us be part a bit of your own learning journey. Um, I usually ask my guests, to tell us where to go to find them, but in your case, I really don't have to ask. I just tell everybody to please go to Dialogue Works and to immediately subscribe to your channel, and and follow you there. But is there any other place where you, for instance, also write sometimes? Any place where people should follow you?
I write on X as well, and they can
Right,
find me on X. Yeah, Dialogue Works. Yeah, on
right.
X.
Dialogue Works on X.
Yeah,
Dialogue Works on
uh,
YouTube. Everybody.
yeah. It's gonna be Substack. We have Substack,
Oh,
and yeah,
you're writing a Substack too?
yeah. Most
Sorry,
of
I didn't
these
discover.
videos, we put the videos on Substack. We mentioned, the concept of the video, the whole, discussion of the video. We put it in Substack as well.
Oh, even better. Everybody also go to Substack and check out Nima's work there. Anything you would like to add at this point?
Nothing. Thank you so much, Pascal, for
We
inviting me.
we covered the globe.
Yeah,
Nima, thank you
exactly.
so much for joining me today.
Thank you.